Have you ever just watched the news and wondered, why do our public institutions seem completely overwhelmed by today's crises? I mean, seriously, whether it's a fractured supply chain that suddenly leaves grocery store shelves totally empty, massive economic shocks, or just cascading infrastructure failures, it's wild, right? Modern governments are pouring literal billions of dollars and immense expertise into these solutions, and yet they just keep failing to solve the big, messy problems. Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking Dr. Abdifatah Osman Hussein's definitive work, The Intelligent State. We're going to be looking directly at the core concepts from his groundbreaking research, which essentially gives us a blueprint for how to rebuild our government. We're talking about shifting it from a rigid, outdated machine into a living, learning organism, one that can actually survive and thrive in this age of exponential change. So here's the really crucial point to grasp right off the bat. Those supply chain breaks and economic shocks we keep seeing, they aren't just isolated incidents or temporary management hiccups. According to the source material, they are actually the visible friction points of an invisible structural collapse in our governing infrastructure. It is a fundamental civilizational mismatch. We are somehow attempting to run a hyper-complex 21st century world on a 19th century bureaucratic operating system. To make sense of this, here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover the complexity gap, dangerous governance illusions, the state as information, the digital operating system, and finally, citizens as intelligence nodes. Let's get right into it. Starting with Section 1, the complexity gap. There's a famous idea, adapted from Einstein, that perfectly anchors Dr. Hussein's whole premise. You cannot solve 21st century problems with 20th century tools. The traditional state was conceived way back during the Industrial Revolution. Just picture a factory assembly line. Bureaucracy was built for predictability, right? It was slow, paper-driven, compliance-heavy. But applying that to our world today, it's honestly like trying to navigate the modern internet with a telegraph machine. Just think about the massive mismatch we are dealing with here. We are trying to govern a highly entangled, almost biological-like reality, where global systems are exponential, volatile, and hyper-complex, using a slow, siloed 19th century machine. In a hyper-connected network, a minor localized disruption can literally destabilize entire national infrastructures within hours. But because traditional bureaucracies process information in these really slow batches, they are structurally blind to those dynamics. They simply cannot process the velocity of the information hitting them. Which brings us to Section 2, Dangerous Governance Illusions. It turns out our usual go-to fixes as a society are actually making things worse. We tend to fall for two big traps. The first illusion is the myth of individual heroism. When a system starts decaying, we desperately look for a charismatic savior to swoop in and fix it. But heroism is actually a sign of system failure. If a state relies entirely on the extraordinary talent of one single person to function, it is dangerously fragile. The second trap is the digital band-aid. We spend millions slapping a shiny AI dashboard onto an isolated, broken bureaucratic silo. But listen, digitizing a broken process doesn't magically make a government smart. It just automates the internal friction, allowing a totally dysfunctional system to make massive mistakes at unprecedented speeds. Moving on to Section 3, the state as information. Okay, let's talk about Ashby's law of requisite variety. It comes from cybernetics and sounds super academic, but it's actually fascinating. It basically means a control system needs to possess at least as much internal variety as the environment it's trying to govern. Think of it like playing a complex video game. If the game throws 100 different types of obstacles at you, but your controller only has one button, you are mathematically guaranteed to fail. A rigid bureaucracy simply lacks the buttons needed to handle a complex, chaotic world. So it's not about bad people in government, it's a structural failure. So how does the state get those extra buttons? Enter the Synovan framework. By adopting this, the intelligent state stops treating every single problem like a slow paperwork issue. It categorizes decisions into simple, complicated, complex, or chaotic domains, so the state knows exactly how to respond. For example, if a crisis is chaotic, like a natural disaster, it triggers immediate stabilization protocols, not months of committee debate. It matches the tool perfectly to the reality on the ground. Instead of an assembly line, the state essentially becomes a biological organism running these continuous cognitive loops. It senses data without hierarchical distortion, interprets the patterns, decides rapidly, acts fluidly, and, this is absolutely crucial, it learns. Legacy bureaucracies have terrible institutional amnesia, right? But this continuous loop ensures every intervention is evaluated. The state actually gets smarter over time, converting raw complexity into actual institutional wisdom. All right, Section 4.
The digital operating system.
So what does this actually look like under the hood? Well, it takes a whole new tech stack to shatter those old ministerial silos and hard code that permanent learning loop into the government's DNA. You've got the DGOS acting as a unified, real-time data fabric. Then there's AI-augmented governance handling massive pattern recognition, always protected by human ethical oversight, of course. And finally, a capability flywheel ensures that decades of operational wisdom are instantly captured and fed back into the system, constantly upgrading the state's capacity to do its job.
Now, you might be thinking, wait, is this just a giant centralized surveillance state? Absolutely not. And that's where Constituency Intelligence Systems, or CIDS, come into play. This localized system makes sure this isn't just dry data sitting on a federal server somewhere. We're talking about the difference between reacting to a famine and actually predicting a localized crop failure or water shortage weeks before it escalates into a national emergency. It equips local, regional leaders with live, predictive dashboards to optimize and protect their own communities.
Which leads us perfectly into our final section, Section 5, Citizens as Intelligence Nodes. This is where you come in. This entire blueprint requires a massive shift in how we view our own roles. The old paradigm treated us as passive consumers of state services, or just, compliant subjects that need to be regulated. The new architecture completely flips this on its head. Everyday people become the primary, high-fidelity sensors of the nation. It shifts us to a system of true epistemic sovereignty. There's this awesome concept called radical subsidiarity, and basically it means pushing power as far down the chain as possible, right to the local edge nodes. Because let's be real, you know your neighborhood's anomalies better than a centralized AI ever could. Through secure digital platforms, citizens can contribute deep, highly contextual knowledge. You aren't just filling out a feedback survey, you are actively co-producing policy. True community agency is reclaimed, building national intelligence from the bottom up. Ultimately, building true state intelligence isn't just some IT purchasing project. It's an evolutionary imperative. Getting there requires a completely new social contract, one that demands all of us to actively participate in this fascinating new paradigm so we can finally move past the industrial age. So the biggest takeaway I want to leave you with today is this. Are you ready to sign the new social contract and become an active intelligence node in the governance of your own future?